Alves. The 25-year-old Brazilian amateur bodybuilder was facing a number of health problems after he became hooked on using an injection known as synthol that enhances the size of the muscles to almost Hulk-like proportions. The ingredients in synthol happen to be a potentially fatal cocktail of alcohol and lidocaine mixed with oil. The concoction ended up hardening his muscles to the point where the needles wouldn't pierce his skin anymore. Alves was quoted saying he enjoyed the attention of children who admired his size and compared him to the Hulk, who was the inspiration that led Alves to this drastic transformation. Doctors almost had to amputate both his arms, and he has since stopped taking the synthol injections. Number 10. Arlindo de Souza. Another case of a Brazilian bodybuilder who wants to have the biggest muscle gains is Arlindo de Souza. Just as Romario, he became addicted to injecting himself with synthol and trying to cut corners with how fast he could get even bigger biceps. The circumference of his bicep muscles was measured at being 29 inches due to the filler causing his muscles to swell so massively. He stated that he lost a friend to the same method that he was using, but has since managed to stop taking the synthol. Number 9. Denis Syplenkov. The 32-year-old is a Ukrainian-born bodybuilder who also happens to be an arm wrestling champion, along with having the largest and most firm muscled hands in the entire world. Denis's gargantuan size is frequently compared to that of the Incredible Hulk. He first began to train his body by using kettlebells, and as his strength grew, he recognized his potential and began to compete in arm wrestling competitions. He stands at 6 feet and 1 inch tall and weighs around 380 pounds. His wrists measure out to be an unusual 9.5 inches thick, with biceps that are measured out to an incredible 25 inches in circumference. In both 2010 and 2011, he won the largest international arm wrestling tournament, known as the Nemirov. Number 8. Hafthor Julius Bjornsson. Game of Thrones fans might know this next guy as the current actor who has portrayed the Mountain on the show's 4th, 5th, and 6th season. Hafthor stands at a whopping 6'9" and weighs almost 400 pounds. Born in Iceland, the 27-year-old wasn't always an actor. He was actually a basketball player, as most guys who are that tall tend to gravitate to as a profession, but he suffered a severe knee injury that cut his basketball career short when he was just 20 years old. He ended up training and eventually became a strongman who started competing and placing in various competitions. He's incredibly strong enough to be able to deadlift 990 pounds. Number 7. Shaquille O'Neal. One of the most famous basketball players ever to be present in the NBA is none other than Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal, even more famously nicknamed Shaq. Born on March 6, 1972, he would later grow up to be 7'1" and weigh a vast amount of 325 pounds. This natural advantage and impressive skills on the court would lead Shaq to have one of the greatest careers any basketball player could hope to achieve. With a huge amount of accolades under his belt, he finally announced his retirement in 2011 and would later be inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. Number 6. Andre the Giant. Real name, Andrei Roussimoff. He was born in France under Bulgarian and Polish ancestry at a very early age, 12 to be exact. The symptoms of Andrei's gigantism were present as he stood at a towering height of 6'3" and weighed 240 pounds. He would later move to Paris and learn how to wrestle professionally by a local promoter who saw the potential that came with his enormous size of 7'4". He ended up becoming one of the most recognizable faces in the wrestling world and would later take on an acting career, most famous for his role as Fezzik in The Princess Bride. Sadly, he passed away in his sleep in 1993 due to congestive heart failure. Number 5. Yao Ming. Born on September 12, 1980, Yao Ming would also become a very famous basketball player in not one, but two professional basketball leagues, the NBA and the CBA. His unbelievable height of 7'6" made him the tallest active basketball player back in his last season of playing. He made the switch from the Chinese Basketball Association to the NBA in 2002 and would go on to play for the Houston Rockets. It was in 2011 that he announced his retirement from the league due to a string of foot and ankle-related injuries that caused him to miss a total of 250 games in the last 6 seasons of his career. In 2014, he was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. Number 4. Vikas Uppal. There is very little information as to regarding Vikas Uppal's short life, though his claim as the tallest man is considered to be a contentious one. Uppal was born in the Rohtak district of Haryana back in 1986. Based on the speculation of the Indian newspaper The Tribune, they reported that he stood at around 8 feet and 3 inches when he was measured as a teenager. However, another news and entertainment website in India called Rediff.com stated that he was 8 feet and 10 inches back in 2005, which would have made him the second tallest man in history. Though most people generally accept that his height was 8 feet and 3 inches, Uppal sadly died on June 3, 2007, while under the knife, as doctors were trying to remove a tumor in his brain. Number 3. Sajjad Gharibi. The 24-year-old Iranian strongman weighs in at an impressive 24 stones, which is 336 pounds, and is able to lift an incredible 386 pounds. That's his own body weight with an additional 50 pounds. Sajjad became an internet sensation when he began to gain attention for his large physique on several of his social media accounts. Since then, he's racked up roughly 59,000 followers on his Instagram account, where people have dubbed him the real-life Hulk because of his somewhat uncanny resemblance to the popular character. Number 2. Brahim Takiola. This man happens to be tied with the Iranian man Morteza Merzad as the second tallest person in the world who is currently alive. However, he has the title of the world's largest feet on a living person to himself, with his feet measuring out a length of over 15 inches, and he has to wear special shoes that are custom made in order to support all of his weight. Brahim was born in Morocco back in 1982, where his size is directly linked to a tumor that affects his pituitary gland, like most people who were born abnormally tall. Basically, the tumor causes the body to have increased levels of growth hormone. Doctors first noticed his unusually large size when he was 18 and recommended that he get a blood test to see if the results would yield any answers. Like with most people who are this tall, he suffers from day-to-day problems that cause the quality of his life to not be as ideal.
And now for number 1. But first, be sure to subscribe for new videos every day.
Number 1. Sultan Kozan. Standing at a staggering height of 8 feet and 3 inches, the part-time farm laborer from Turkey holds the current title for the tallest living man in the world. Kozan's enormous stature is due to a tumor that affects his pituitary gland, like many other of the world's tallest people, and has been linked to the disorder acromegaly. It wasn't until he was 10 years old that he would grow past 6 feet, and from then on had to use crutches to walk. Because of this, he was unable to finish his education. In 2008, there was an attempt to remove the tumor in his brain, but it failed because of how deep the tumor was. It wasn't until 2012 that he had a procedure that finally stopped his accelerated growth. He married his wife back in 2013, and their height difference isn't much of a problem. It's the fact that they don't speak the same languages. She speaks Arabic, and he speaks Turkish and Kurdish. Sultan recently joined the Magic Circus of Samoa after the director personally asked him to. Now, here's what's next. Click here to watch 13 Life Mysteries Science Can.
G'day, hi, and welcome. Nephilims, okay, Nephilims, however you want to say them. The Anunnaki, whatever. I made a video called Nephilim Giants or Just Really Tall People. It was something along that lines. And that video seemed to got quite popular, and people had a lot to say out of it. I got almost about as much good criticism out of it as, bad criticism out of it. And, some people say, educate yourself on the subject. Other people say, he's got a point. At least he's trying to find the truth. And other people say, dumbass. Other people are, wow, that's brilliant. So it's just all over the map and stuff like that. And I've even had some, I guess, people that were tall comment on it, and some people may have taken offense, kind of saying, "You're calling us a bunch of freaks of nature. We're not freaks of nature. We're people too." Geez, wasn't my intention. Now you're probably seeing, okay, well, for example, like this guy, the strongman stuff. This kind of plays into something that I was saying in the first one. I haven't watched that video to kind of remember everything I said in there. So if I kind of recap a few things, I apologize, but I don't apologize. I'm making it anyway. But yeah, and I'm sure some of the stuff that you're going to see is Photoshop. But some of these people, like, I mean, they're quite popular, and you can find them. Now, I used to work with a guy that was 7'2", and he definitely stood out. If you were to see him, say, not by something that you could judge his height, like reference, like, like standing by a car, standing by another person or whatever, when you look at him, he was completely evenly proportioned. So, if you would just, like, say, standing in a grassy field somewhere that you couldn't, pick out his height, you would say he's probably just like a guy 5'10". But as soon as you see him in contrast to something else, it's like, oh my God, he's 7'2". And it's not like, oh my God, I'm terrified or anything. It's just kind of, oh wow, he's tall, but evenly proportioned. Where there are some people that you'll see, for example, that have, and I do understand there is a, genetic things that happen that, and I can't, the name's eluding me right now, but where people just keep growing and growing and growing, and they're, I do understand that part of it, okay? But I'm also, the whole debate was about, or not really debate, but just kind of observation, is to make people question. So I think I accomplished that, people questioning different things. Now I'm going to take it a step further in this one, just kind of, not so much looking at the people that are necessarily just really tall, but the people that are also extremely strong. Because in the last video, I put a lot of pictures that people were saying, hey, how come, the women are tall and attractive and all that stuff, but yet all the guys are kind of decrepit and hunched over and walking with canes, and it looks like it's working out bad for them. And I don't know how that happened. I don't know how the pretty women got in here. It's just must be science. It must be. Anyway, so a lot of people called me on that one, I guess. But anyway, but the point is that, again, there's a difference between somebody who I call tall and somebody who I call big. Tall is just somebody skinny and lanky and kind of, they're usually not proportional. But somebody who's just big is actually still proportional. And that's where I think you get these kind of Nephilim, whatever. Now, also, two people refer to the Cyclopia part of Nephilims, that they were supposed to have 6 toes and 6 fingers, that type of thing, and many of them were Cyclops. Now, Cyclopia is an actual disease. It's very disturbing to look at. Most people don't or usually most babies don't survive it. So if you're going to look at stuff like that, don't look at it with little kids around. Might, give them nightmares or something. But the thing is again, there's some people that are just big. And from the strength point of view, like, some people, okay, they're not, and I'm not talking the roid heads, the ones that, juice up on every sort of wonder horse tranquilizer that they can possibly do. I'm just talking about people that are, like, obscenely strong, but just naturally. And if you know people like this, you'll always remember the person that could just lift anything, like, regardless if they're really tall or not. It's just, there's some people that I know, like, they're just complete utter powerhouses, but to look at them, they'd be unassuming, that you wouldn't think they're as strong as they are. And I wonder if that would be considered a trait, you know what I mean? But that said, we know that, scientifically speaking, that Caucasians and Asians tend to be the stronger of the human race. Usually tend to be actually a little more stout than Africans, and usually stronger, body strength wise, on average. And I know some people say, oh, well, this guy's stronger than that, this guy, that's not the argument. The argument is on the average. We tend to have better body strength because we tend to have shorter torsos and stuff. Now, you get a guy like Big Show, for example. You could tell that Big Show is not a guy who's taken a ton of steroids and stuff. He's just a big freaking guy, and you could tell he's naturally strong, especially when you see him pick up guys almost his size and put them over his head. When you're picking up somebody that's over 200 pounds, and some of them into the like almost 400 pound mark, and putting them over their head, they're strong. The strongman contests, these guys are insanely strong. And again, you look at them, some of them, I'm sure they they have extremely strict diets and stuff like that. They probably do take steroids and stuff, but they're not like bodybuilder where they're built up for like definition. They're just naturally strong people to begin with, and then they just enhance what they got. And sometimes they overdo it, by eating like 25,000 eggs a year type of thing. I used to know a bodybuilder. Well, I still know them, but he was a bodybuilder, and he'd eat I think it's like 6 eggs every couple of hours. It was just unbelievable. But like all that cholesterol is so hard on the heart, and a lot of these guys end up usually dying of heart attacks. But they're so committed to what they do, bodybuilding or whatever, or the strongman contests or whatever, that these people, okay, you could say, well, it's not necessarily generic, but you look at this guy here. I mean, the guy he's standing beside is over 6 feet tall. That just kind of really puts things into perspective. And there has been skulls that were found in North America, and when they found these skulls, at first they didn't really think much of it, but they realized when they looked at the lower jaw that the lower jaw indicated that these were very large people, not as in like Neanderthal large, but like Neanderthals weren't extremely large, but they were about 6 feet tall, some of them. But they estimated these people to be in the 7 to 8 foot tall range. I mean, look at Cain looking up at somebody here, and I've seen Cain in person. This man is big. He is a big, big man. He's huge. And he's looking up at that guy. So does that not tell you everything you need to know? I don't think it's the whole Nephilim thing is, some people are taking it from the religious aspect, and some people are taking it from a biological aspect, and other people are just kind of, believe whatever they believe. So it's kind of a weird thing that when because it's not really one thing that you can shake anybody's belief system. And my goal isn't to tell you how to think. It's you think for you. But when we're looking at, like here's a perfect example. Here's Cain here. If you don't know who Cain is, he's basically you couldn't tell this man's like 7 feet tall just by looking at the background. So he's completely proportional. He's not like a what you'd call like disproportionate, where he's got like a really long torso and long lanky arms, and then just kind of like out of proportion. He's in proportion. Now the Nephilim were offered of the sons of God to the daughters of men. Now, what that means, I guess, is basically what they're saying is basically the offspring between angels and, basically these sons of God, right? So when they look at that, you'd probably say, okay, well, that's the religious aspect of it. But in a modern day context, we pretty much would say that nobody that's tall was kind of a, born from the son of a God and the daughters of man, right? You would probably say, okay, well, this person just inherited the tall gene. But then again, there's different types of tall. There's people, like I say, that are tall and lanky that can barely walk, because they're it's kind of like they're abnormally tall. Even they might not be the tallest person in the world. They're like very skinny and lanky. And then there's other people that are just tall and proportional. So I guess if we the term Nephilim occurs twice in the Hebrew Bible, both in the Torah and in Genesis 6:1 to 6:4, immediately before the story of Noah's Ark. So could these people have existed as a normal, like a normal, breed of people, so to speak, or race of people? I believe they could have. And I believe because of the interbreeding that went on with, say, other, between, like, for example, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, which, if you don't know, all Europeans share Neanderthal DNA. Okay, and plus with some of the findings in Serbia, for example, has discovered another human, about a 200,000-year-old human relative. And of course, in Spain, they found a 400,000-year-old, descendant of human beings. So at some point, when you go back beyond 20,000 years, there were all kinds of people walking around of different distant cousins, Neanderthals, Desovians. I think that's how you say it, Desovian. I always have a problem with those ones. The Desovians, which Asians share DNA with Desovians. Okay, and then if you got even micro hominids that were found, like these, like little people that were like 2 feet, 2.5 feet tall. You'd call them leprechauns almost. They weren't midgets. They were actually a smaller species of people that were found in somewhere in the Philippines, I think in 2009, 2010. So we're discovering all these different hominids that were running around, and a lot of them were just, average height. Some of them a little short, some a little tall, but all roughly in between the 3 and 5 foot range would be the average of all these different hominids. We also know that, when we showed up on the scenes, that there was also at least 3 other hominids running around, 3 other types. So you had Homo sapiens, us. You had definitely the what you call it, the Neanderthals, and then you had the Desovians, and plus these other, I can't remember the names of them. They were a different. They weren't Neanderthals. They weren't Desovians. They were something else, and they were just a different hominid. So we had at least 3 or 4 that we know of. Maybe there, at one point on the Earth, there could have been hundreds of species of humans. Maybe not in big clusters, but maybe there was 4, maybe 500 different species of humans. So we know that we can say that there's at least, I forget what the last count was, but at least 12 or 15 different types of hominids that were on the planet. Now, the ones that have the most human traits, you find within the past 400,000 years. And 400,000 years ago, we didn't look like we do today, but the traits are there. You start seeing the more human side of these little hominids. Okay, so with that said, I don't think it's unbelievable that if we could find hominids that were on the scale side of like 3 to 5 feet tall, that there was an impossibility that there were people much, much taller. Now, again, for the people that are only going to take it from the religious aspect, usually, you're not going to be able to have a debate with that, because they believe that's fine, and I'm not trying to disprove anything they're saying or like that. But what I'm really opening the door for is for the conversation of, we don't know everything. And one person put, because I said, basically we're related to pond scum if we go back far enough. One of our oldest ancestors is a fish, or like a fish type of thing. And then from there, it was like a kind of like a fish lizardy thing that kind of came out of the water. And then after that was like a big giant Jurassic looking pig. And it was basically like an iguana, but it was closer related to pigs, to a modern day pig, but it shares our DNA as well. So, and at that, humans share tons of DNA with pigs. We actually have probably more in common with pigs than we do gorillas and apes. or gorillas and monkeys. Like we share those things. Now the thing is there was one guy, and I do appreciate anybody's comments on my videos, just because that's what I do this for, is to keep the dialogue. And he says there's no such thing as evolution or DNA because God created everything. But here's the thing, and this is just to make you think. I'm not calling you out or anything like that, but you have to understand, okay, when we look at the Holy Bible and stuff like that, and whether it's New Testament, Old Testament, whatever, like the Book of Mormon, or even you're talking about 27 books that's supposed to explain everything about humanity, right? That's impossible. So, and here's why. Because number one, we don't even know if there is a God. We don't know, and maybe you believe me, maybe you don't. So I'll let I'm not going to tell you guys how to think, but think about it this way: if we don't know what the name or the gender of the one who created us in his image or her image, we don't know. I'm assuming from the references of the Bible that God's most likely a man of some sort. Okay, but we don't even know what his name is. You know what I mean? But there's also what's known as the grand design. Forget what the number is. It's 4126 or something like. Anyway, it's a proportional number that you will find in anything that is anything in nature, whether it's a leaf, whether it's a stick, whether it's a tree, a human being. Everything has this number that it's a constant that comes up. It's a number. I wish I could remember the number off the top of my head. That even though something might look like it's out of proportion, out of shape, or not normal, you will find this number that pops up in every shape, everything on the planet, and it seems to be like a grand design number. Okay, and the thing about that is that if that was the blueprint to create things, okay, whether you believe it's by just a fluke, the whole the whole universe is a fluke, or if that you believe that the grand design is that of aliens, or if you believe that it's a god, or whatever you might believe, but that number comes up. That's irrefutable. The next thing is, well, DNA is irrefutable. It's there. But the thing is you can't say that there is no evolution or DNA, because if there was a God and he had a grand design, okay, he would make things in whatever image he wanted, but he would make things with his own recipe. His recipe might be DNA. That might be the thing. So to say that, because if God created the heavens and the earth and the Nephilims and everybody that, everything that came after, well, the thing is then yes, we'd all be related. I mean, we'd be related to all things because it was created by the same creator. Now, if we take it from a scientific point of view, again, you can't ignore the science of these numbers that pop up for the proportional, the proportional things in nature, how everything is proportional the same. It doesn't matter if you grab a car, or you grab a leaf, or you grab anything. Everything has this inherently proportional number. And as soon as I can think of the number, it's like 4126 or something like that. And it's just a number that comes up. It's a constant. Now, I know this sounds like I'm getting off track, but I'm not getting off track here. So with those designs, you could see some people argue that people couldn't be more than, say, 10 to 12 feet tall, or else their own weight would just crush them. But I think it depends on the time frame you're talking about. Remember, when the Earth first was formed, okay? Sorry about that. The days were only about 4 hours long. Yeah. We're now at a 24-hour day. Okay? And remember, 400,000 years ago, okay, it was that's kind of like 380 million to 400 million years ago, you start to get, the beginnings of finding life. But they found stuff even older than that now. That might, life may have began before that, okay? And it is said, what is new is not new. right? So, so maybe at some point we did have a different type of a world where things were different, because you remember the Earth has went through many changes. It's went from being a big, basically a bunch of space dust hurtling around, and it, attracted to itself until it became a big space rock. And then from there, another space rock hit it, made it into molten lava, basically the moon crashing into us. So we couldn't live there when the Earth was a big fireball. And then, of course, at one point there was volcanoes that, basically volcanoes that, the air, the acid rain, I mean, it would have wrecked the paint job on everybody's car to have the acid rain we used to have. I mean, from all the volcanoes. And then, of course, as our oceans got bigger, you just couldn't live here as a modern day human. This would have been an inhospitable planet, much as Mars is now. Maybe at one point Mars was as hospitable as Earth. Things change. And then at another point, there was also when the Earth was basically 10 mile thick layer of ice the entire way around. It was a big giant ice ball, and then it took billions and billions of years to thaw out. But as it did, things started to move along, and next thing we know, we had life. And even at that, when life came onto this planet, the oxygen was pretty low. We couldn't live here. Then, of course, a few million years ago, just after the Jurassic period, the oxygen was so rich on this planet that we'd go into basically, after about 12 minutes, you'd be hypoxiated, and you'd go into a giggle fit and die. Which, I mean, I guess it's a happy way to go, but still would suck. A lightning strike was like a nuke going off. You had bugs that were 30 feet tall. Now also too, for about 400,000 years ago, oxygen was actually richer. Even 12,000 years ago, the oxygen was slightly richer on this planet than it is today. So with that, when we have a rich oxygen atmosphere, things grow bigger. That's typically the way it goes. Okay, so that's not an absolute, but if people, again, we go 400,000 years ago, and we had all kinds of different hominids running around. Is it not unbelievable? Okay, because there are numbers of any one hominid, even say 10,000 years ago, even if it was just us 10,000 years ago, but 10,000 years ago, you still had Neanderthals. So there could have been other things, but the numbers were low. There was, maybe if you added all the hominids up together, there might have been only a couple of million, which when you think about the 7 billion people we have nowadays, so there was probably hominids that maybe they never got greater than numbers bigger than a few hundred or a few thousand, and they maybe stayed in one region here or there, and maybe these people were extremely tall. Now, they found a swamp, again, in the United States where they found these tall people, and it's controversial. They're saying the DNA looks, it's the Wendover find? Is it Wendover or Winchester? Not Winchester. I think it's a Wendover find. It was a swamp. They drained it out. They found a whole hundreds of these people that were basically buried there. And again, it looks like these people were unusually tall. Now, some people argue that the DNA was more European, and some people argue that the DNA was more African. So that's in debate. But they do know that, again, some of the stuff doesn't get added into, again, some of these skulls that they have found with the people with the big massive jaws, and then, when they put these, it was the jaw that really defined it. When they put the skulls beside a modern day human skull, they realized that these things are much larger. So when you're just looking at them out of context, without the rest of the body there, you don't realize how big they actually are. So when you think of it, when they piece it together, these people might be 7 to 8 feet tall. So if you could have people 7 to 8 feet tall, you could have people taller. We used to have, forget the name of the gorilla, the tallest gorilla in that we know of was 9, 10, 12 feet tall. You know what I mean? So you take a modern gorilla nowadays, you know, and when you notice in history when the tall things were about, they're all kind of found at the same kind of time. You know, dinosaurs were kind of found at the same kind of time because the Earth supported dinosaurs at that time. But there's also other things to keep in mind, is that just because we haven't discovered everything yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And this is where I get a bit of a problem with modern day science, or so-called scientists, is they work themselves to an Earth is flat kind of mentality. And here's what I mean. They have an open mind until they discover something. Once they discover something, they stop searching beyond that. They stop trying to and it doesn't mean there aren't some things that you could say are absolutes, but a lot of times when there's no way we know everything, and the way we're discovering things now, especially, maybe life actually evolved in Serbia and that region of the world. They found people in 2010. They found people in Russia who have basically the oldest DNA that you find in North American Indians. So maybe we originally, and they figured this is the migration from basically Russia to or China, that kind of region over into North America. They figured that's where these people originated from. But that's just because that's what we know. And plus, you have to understand too, the water lines of the oceans were not, 20,000 years ago, were in different spots than where they are today. So there's probably a lot of stuff that's covered with water that we don't know about. In fact, in Mexico, they recently found a skull that dates back, it's 13,000 years old. It's the oldest skull they found, and they found it out in the ocean. They didn't find it on land. So, again, there's a lot of stuff about our history that we just don't know. Now, some people take offense if you, go, like for me, I'm completely convinced that the out of Africa theory 40,000 years ago is busted. That it's not possible. Why? Number one, evolution, if you believe in evolution or an evolution, it doesn't work the way you think it works a lot of times. That's why you don't see people gradually turning from one thing to another. So it's not really an evolution. I think there's more just mutations. This group turns into that group or whatever. But I also do believe it's probably each group is comprised of DNA from hominids that we haven't discovered yet. So that's why you have Asians. That's why you have Caucasians. That's why you have Africans. That type of thing. The story of the Nephilim is further elaborated in the book of Enoch. The Greek, Aramaic, and main Giza manuscripts of Enoch and the Jubilees obtained in the 19th century, held by the British Museum and Vatican Library, connect the origin of the Nephilim with the fallen angels, and particularly the the Watchers, basically, and Sesmia and angels high rank, described as leaders, rebel angels in the descent to the earth, having sexual encounters with human females. Okay, so let's keep going here. I'm getting this from Wikipedia. So, and it came to pass when the children of man had multiplied, that those days were born unto them beautiful and common daughters. The angels and the children of heaven saw the lust and lusted after them, and said to one another, "Come, let us choose us wives among the children, and men beget us children." And the Sesma, or Watchers, or Semages, or okay, I'm bad at pronouncing things, whatever. Who there led said unto them, "I fear ye will not indeed agree to this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of the great sin." And they all answered him and said, "Let us all swear an oath, and the blind ourselves by mutual implications, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then they shall altogether bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were all 200 and descended in the days of Jared, and the summit of Mount Hermon, and called Mount Hermon because they had sworn to bound themselves by the mutual imprecations upon it. Okay. So this is just some more reading of stuff here. So they decided to do this. So maybe, again, I believe all the Bibles are written, with some truth in the sense that, whether you believe it from a religious standpoint or that the people who wrote it believed what they were writing and were just describing something of their time. Because again, people would have been much more superstitious and more supernaturally oriented way back then. And you see this in every culture. Idol worship, carvings, so you see it in every culture. So again, for some people, they will, not be able to accept, different interpretations of the same thing. But you do see a lot of, ancient civilizations carving, usually a giant figure somewhere. So I don't think it's impossible to believe that there were people that were big, that were tall. Maybe they called them Nephilims. Maybe we'd just call them really tall people. And again, there was somebody that also commented in that last video that they didn't believe when I said that the average height of the average European in the medieval times was only like about 4'8", that type of thing. And the reason why they know that is through the medieval armor that they find. The average person wasn't that tall. A lot of this is probably due to bad diet, colder weather and a bad diet. Look at the people up in the north. Again. If I don't know too many extremely tall Inuit people. They're usually average height or very short. And a lot of that has to do with bad diet and cold climate. It kind of stunts growth. At -40, -50.
German secret societies ran into
cold climate. It kind of stunts growth. At -40, -50, it stunts your growth. Yeah, you don't want to grow in that. Your body needs to, adapt. But there's other problems, and this is something where, again, I don't really believe this whole, out of Africa theory, and people went north and then completely adapted to their environment, and that's why you have this, and this, and that's why you have white people here and stuff like that. But that doesn't work either, and I'll tell you why, because the timeline doesn't match up. Okay, I mean, how long does it take to go from being a black African? If you were to take the blackest of Africans, okay, take them, move them to the right up to Alert. Arctic Bay, Alert, those type of places, and conduct an experiment for the next 1,000 years. Okay, I could probably tell you that their descendants are probably still going to look an awful lot like them. They're probably still going to be black. They're probably still going to be, maybe they might have gradually get a little bit shorter, but they're probably still they might even become slightly lighter skinned at some point. But I think what would happen is either they would stay the same, they would look the same until until a mutation happened, where one day all of a sudden a blue-eyed, blonde-haired kid comes out, and that has happened. But when you see them, I believe that the different races are more, and I do believe they're there is different races, you know, because there's also been, and the reason why I say that, and it's not to offend people, and it's not that, well, you know, I'm Eurocentric or, you know, Afrocentric or whatever. It's more of, things just don't add up for me, you know, because the problem is that we say, okay, well, you know, if this little experiment that I'm describing would say, okay, well, how long does it take, you know, black Africans to evolve to, say, you know, like I say, alert, someplace like alert, if you don't know